Welcome back to Chapter by Chapter Classics, the short-form classic literature podcast where each episode walks you through a few chapters of a great book. Previously in Wuthering Heights, we introduced Emily Bronte's dark Gothic romance, the wild moorland setting, the two houses at the center of the story, and the themes of love, revenge, class, and haunting memory. In this episode, we're beginning the novel with chapters 1 through 4, where Mr. Lockwood meets Heathcliff, spends a disturbing night at Wuthering Heights, and starts to hear the story behind that strange household.
Usually when you rent a place in the country for a quiet getaway, there is this baseline expectation of basic hospitality.
Oh, definitely.
You imagine a warm fire, maybe a friendly landlord dropping off some fresh eggs, or having a nice chat over the garden fence.
Right. It's that whole pastoral idyll thing. It's a very comforting, deeply ingrained cliche. I mean, especially in English literature.
Exactly. But then you step into the world of Emily Bronte, and suddenly your cozy vacation rental is this psychological haunted house. The landlord is actively hostile, and the local wildlife seems well possessed, basically.
Yeah, it really is quite a shock to the system.
Welcome to this deep dive. Whether you are brushing up on your classics, prepping for a class, or, just a curious reader looking for a wild ride, today's mission is to untangle one of the most chaotic, intense, and confusing openings in literature. We are diving into the first 4 chapters of Wuthering Heights.
And honestly, Bronte brilliantly disorientates the listener right from the very first page. She takes all those Victorian expectations of politeness and domestic comfort and she completely shatters them immediately.
Okay, let's unpack this. The year is 1801, and we are following a wealthy, fashionable, and honestly somewhat oblivious gentleman named Mr. Lockwood.
Very oblivious.
Right. He has just rented Thrushcross Grange, which is this beautiful, civilized estate out in the isolated Yorkshire moors. And he decides to pay a neighborly visit to his landlord, Mr. Heathcliff, who lives about 4 miles away at a farmhouse called Wuthering Heights.
We should probably pause on that name, actually. Wuthering.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So Lockwood notes that wuthering is a local provincial word, and it describes, atmospheric tumult.
Tumult, that's a good word for it.
Yeah, it refers to the fierce howling winds that the house is exposed to during a storm. And the architecture itself reflects this constant, brutal battle with nature. The narrow windows are deeply set into the walls, and the corners are defended with these large, jutting stones. I mean, it is built for defense, not comfort.
The place is basically a medieval fortress. Over the principal door, Lockwood spots this grotesque carving. It's like a wilderness of crumbling griffins, along with the date 1500 and the name Catherine Earnshaw.
Which is quite an imposing entrance.
It practically screams, "Keep out!" But Lockwood, in all his infinite wisdom, decides this is just the rustic charm he is looking for.
What's fascinating here is the massive disconnect between what Lockwood sees and what he actually believes.
Yeah, he's projecting so much.
Exactly. Lockwood fancies himself a bit of a misanthrope. He tells us he came to the moors to be completely removed from the stir of society. So when he meets Heathcliff, a man who is genuinely deeply antisocial, Lockwood assumes they are kindred spirits, he actually calls Heathcliff a capital fellow.
Which is hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
He is like a naive tourist wandering into a horror movie, thinking the monsters are just, locals putting on a rustic show for his entertainment.
That's a perfect way to put it.
He completely misreads the situation. I mean, Heathcliff is standing there, literally hiding his hands deep in his waistcoat with jealous resolution, just so he doesn't have to shake hands.
Right.
And he's telling Lockwood to walk in through closed teeth.
Yeah, Heathcliff's walk-in is delivered with the sentiment of basically go to the devil. Every interaction he has is guarded. He views everything as a potential threat or intrusion.
It's so tense.
It is. And then he calls for his servant, an old man named Joseph, to take Lockwood's horse. And Joseph looks so sour that Lockwood jokes the man must need divine aid just to digest his dinner.
Oh, Joseph is a whole other level of welcoming.
Right. And Heathcliff himself is a fascinating visual contradiction. While the house belongs to a homely northern farmer, Heathcliff looks like a dark-skinned gypsy in aspect, but he's dressed and carries himself with the manners of a gentleman, albeit a morose, slovenly one.
So Lockwood survives this incredibly chilly first visit. Heathcliff basically tells him not to come back. So why on earth does Lockwood return the very next day?
Well, It really comes down to a potent mix of vanity and boredom.
Mostly vanity, I'd say.
Yeah, Lockwood is so sheltered and so thoroughly convinced of his own charm that he is utterly blind to real danger. He assumes Heathcliff's reserve is just a theatrical exaggeration of his own fashionable aloofness. The 19th century social contract tells Lockwood that gentlemen visit each other. He just cannot fathom a world where those rules do not apply.
Which is a fatal error in judgment. That vanity drives him to make a second visit, wading through mud in an incoming snowstorm to get back to the Heights. And Bronte shifts the narrative gear here.
She really does.
We move from a cold reception in Chapter 1 to an actively hostile entrapment in Chapter 2. Lockwood literally has to jump a locked gate just to get onto the property.
And once he's inside, Lockwood encounters the rest of this bizarre, confusing household. Bronte is actively weaponizing and dismantling those 19th century Victorian expectations of hospitality and domesticity that we were talking about earlier. She intentionally disorients you alongside Lockwood.
It's the most uncomfortable dinner party imaginable. You have Lockwood trying to make polite conversation and just failing spectacularly at every turn. Like he tries to pet a cushion of cats, and it turns out to be a pile of dead rabbits.
Which is just such a grotesque detail.
Right, and then he assumes the beautiful, blonde, incredibly scornful young woman in the room is Heathcliff's wife.
Which Heathcliff corrects that assumption with a diabolical sneer.
Yeah.
The young woman is his daughter-in-law. Her husband, who is Heathcliff's son, is dead.
Undeterred, Lockwood pivots. He looks at the rough, uncultivated young man sitting at the table. This is a guy with thick brown curls, wearing dirty laborer's clothes, eating with unwashed hands. So Lockwood figures, okay, this must be Heathcliff's son, married to the beautiful widow.
And that's another humiliating mistake. The rough young man growls that his name is Catherine Earnshaw and aggressively counsels Lockwood to respect it.
So he is trapped in a room with a misanthropic landlord, a bitter widow, a furious rustic laborer, and Joseph, the fanatically religious servant, muttering curses. Bronte isolates him socially, and then the snowstorm hits hard outside, isolating him physically.
The storm is really the catalyst that forces the narrative forward. The roads are completely buried. Lockwood, suddenly realizing his peril, demands a guide to get back to the Grange safely.
And Heathcliff's response is just wild.
Heathcliff flatly refuses. He states he does not keep accommodations for visitors, and if Lockwood stays, he can share a bed with Hareton or Joseph. It just strips away any remaining illusion of civilized society.
Lockwood is enraged and panicked, so he grabs a lantern to leave on his own and immediately gets attacked.
Oh, yeah. The dogs, Gnasher and Wolf, they fly at his throat, knock him down, and put out his light.
And Heathcliff just watches.
Yeah, Heathcliff and Hareton just stand there and laugh at him. The only person who intervenes is the robust cook, Zillah. She breaks up the attack by splashing a pint of icy water right down Lockwood's neck,
Leaving him dizzy, bleeding from the nose, and physically forced to stay the night.
The physical collapse and entrapment are crucial mechanisms here. The storm and the dogs push Lockwood completely out of his comfort zone, and once he is locked inside the house, Bronte forces him into an even smaller, more claustrophobic box.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Zillah sneaks him upstairs into a room that Heathcliff normally forbids anyone to enter. Lockwood ends up sleeping inside this large, old-fashioned oak case. It is essentially a bed enclosed within a cabinet, pushed right up against a window. It feels protective, but it is really a psychological trap.
It's a profoundly psychological space. Lockwood places his candle on a ledge and notices the paint is covered in writing. One name is scratched repeatedly into the wood in all different sizes. Catherine Earnshaw, Catherine Heathcliff, Catherine Linton.
He finds a pile of mildewed books on the ledge, covered in marginalia. It is a diary written by a young Catherine Earnshaw from years ago. She is complaining about her tyrannical older brother, Hindley.
Right, Hindley forces her and a young Heathcliff to sit through Joseph's 3-hour sermons.
3 hours?
Yeah, and he treats Heathcliff like a vagabond and literally throws them into the back kitchen.
This diary entry is our first real glimpse into the past. It establishes that Heathcliff and this Catherine shared a deep, rebellious bond forged in childhood trauma and oppression. Lockwood consumes this text, nods off, and falls into a deeply troubled sleep, setting the stage for 2 vivid nightmares.
Yeah, these dreams are intense.
The first one is this tedious, anxiety-inducing dream where he is forced to listen to a preacher deliver a sermon on the 71st sin, which devolves into a massive brawl in the chapel.
Right. He dreams of a preacher named Jabez Branderham, and he wakes up from that chaotic brawl because a fir tree branch is tapping against his window in the wind. He falls back asleep, and the tapping sound follows him into the second dream.
And in the second dream, he is back in the oak closet. He hears the branch tapping, so he knocks his knuckles through the glass to snap it off. But instead of a branch, his fingers close around a little ice-cold hand.
So creepy.
And a face outside the window starts sobbing, "Let me in, let me in. I'm Catherine Linton. I've been away for 20 years. Lockwood's reaction here is very telling. This supposedly civilized gentleman is paralyzed by terror, and terror makes him incredibly cruel.
Oh, the cruelty is shocking.
It really is. He pulls the child's wrist onto the broken pane and rubs it to and fro until the blood runs down and soaks the bedclothes. Is a terrifying moment of violence from our refined narrator.
Wait, hold on. We just spent the last 10 minutes establishing that Lockwood is a vain idiot who misinterprets literally everything he sees. Why should we, or you, listening to this, believe for a second that he actually saw a ghost? Well, Bronte leaves it brilliantly ambiguous on purpose. You can absolutely read it as a purely psychological manifestation. Lockwood just suffered a dog attack, drank bad tea, read a deceased girl's traumatic diary, and heard a tree branch tapping.
That's a lot for his brain to process.
Exactly. His brain synthesizes all that into a nightmare. But whether the ghost is a supernatural entity or a psychological projection doesn't matter nearly as much as how Heathcliff reacts to it.
Lockwood's frenzied scream wakes up the house. Heathcliff bursts into the room, pale as the wall, wearing only his shirt and trousers, holding a dripping candle. When Lockwood tells him about the ghost of Catherine Linton, Heathcliff is furious and essentially kicks Lockwood out of the room. And then Lockwood secretly watches what Heathcliff does next.
And this is the moment that shatters the tough, misanthropic exterior Lockwood so admired.
Heathcliff gets onto the bed, wrenches open the window to the swirling snow, and bursts into an uncontrollable passion of tears. He is sobbing, begging, "Come in, come in. Kathy, do come. Do once more. Oh, my heart's darling. Hear me this time, Catherine, at last."
It is a bottomless, agonizing grief. I mean, this isn't the edgy, cool misanthrope Lockwood thought he was dealing with. This is a man who has been hollowed out by a loss so profound that he is literally begging a ghost to haunt him.
Wow.
It completely recontextualizes everything we've seen so far. Heathcliff's hostility isn't a fashionable pose. It is a shield for a devastating, decades-old wound.
So what does this all mean? Lockwood is traumatized. He cannot handle this level of raw, unfiltered emotion. So the very next morning, he escapes back to Thrushcross Grange, sinking up to his neck in snow just to get away.
Just has to flee.
Safe at home, eating his gruel, Lockwood asks his housekeeper, a matronly lady named Mrs. Ellen Dean, or Nelly, to explain the history of his landlord's family. And this introduces us to the frame narrative.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this dual narrator setup is just a stroke of genius. Think of a frame narrative like a set of nesting dolls.
Nesting dolls, I like that.
Yeah, so Lockwood is the outer frame. He is the outsider, the city gentleman, telling us what he sees right now in the present day of 1801. But he lacks the historical context. For that, he needs Nelly Dean.
Nelly is the inner frame. She is a servant who used to work at Wuthering Heights. She grew up with these people. She takes over as the main storyteller, taking us back in time to explain how all this chaos started. Bronte does this to force you into an active role. You have to filter the truth through two distinct biases. We have Lockwood, who we already know misjudges everyone, and then we have Nelly.
And Nelly starts the flashback with the old master of Wuthering Heights, Mr. Earnshaw. Years ago, when Nelly was just a young girl helping out at the farm, Mr. Earnshaw goes on a massive 60-mile walk to Liverpool for business.
60 miles on foot.
Yeah, different times. So before he leaves, he asks his children what they want him to bring back. His son, Hindley, asks for a fiddle. His daughter, Kathy, who is hardly 6 years old, asks for a whip.
Which tells you a lot about Kathy's personality right out of the gate.
Oh, for sure.
But when Mr. Earnshaw finally returns days later, he opens his greatcoat and doesn't pull out a fiddle or a whip. He pulls out a dirty, dark-haired, starving child he found abandoned on the streets of Liverpool.
Mr. Earnshaw tells his family he brought the boy home to save him from starvation. They christen him with the name of a son who had died in childhood, Heathcliff. It serves as both his first and last name.
Bringing this foundling into the house is like tossing a grenade into a rigid Victorian social structure. The socio-economic shockwave is massive. You have a landowning Yorkshire farming family suddenly forced to accept a gypsy-like street child as one of their own.
The disruption is immediate.
The seeds of conflict have sown right there. Hindley, the older brother, absolutely hates the boy. He feels Heathcliff has stolen his father's affection. And to be fair, he kind of did. Mr. Earnshaw pets Heathcliff far above his own children.
And Heathcliff's reaction to this hostile new environment is a masterclass in childhood survival mechanisms. Nelly describes him as a sullen, patient child. He isn't outwardly aggressive at first. He is hardened to ill treatment. He would absorb physical blows from Hindley without winking or shedding a single tear.
He's like a sponge soaking up the abuse. But he is also incredibly observant and manipulative. Nelly tells this story about Mr. Earnshaw buying 2 colts for the boys at a fair. Heathcliff gets the handsomest one, but it falls lame.
Right, the horse incident. So Heathcliff goes to Hindley and says, "You must exchange horses with me. I don't like mine, and if you refuse, I shall tell your father of the 3 thrashings you've given me this week."
Classic blackmail.
Exactly. He weaponizes Earnshaw's favoritism. Hindley responds by throwing a heavy iron weight at him. Heathcliff just takes the physical blow, threatens him again with the father's wrath, and calmly walks off with the healthy horse.
If you look at this through a modern psychological lens, Heathcliff isn't just a villain. He is an abused child who has learned that the only way to survive a hostile system is to use that system against his abusers. He uses the very power dynamic that oppresses him to exact his toll. It is a chilling glimpse into the tactics of a child who has nothing but his own sheer will.
It really is. The foundation for all that adult anger, the savage dogs, the locked gates, the agonizing tears at the window, it all starts with this strange, starving boy brought into a house that doesn't want him and a society that refuses to grant him a place.
We have covered incredible ground today. We followed Lockwood's disastrous attempts at being a good neighbor. We navigated the confusing hostile family tree at that extremely awkward dinner party. We survived a terrifying night in an oak closet with a bleeding ghost and witnessed the shattered facade of a broken-hearted landlord. We finally stepped into the past with Nelly Dean, discovering Heathcliff's origins as a mysterious, disruptive foundling.
And this raises an important question for you to consider as we move forward. We are now entirely in the hands of Nelly Dean as our storyteller. To Lockwood, she seems like a warm, reliable, chatty housekeeper. But she wasn't just observing this history from the sidelines. She was a direct participant in this family's toxic childhood. She admitted she hated Heathcliff at first, too, and pinched him just like the others.
A narrator with her own agenda.
Exactly. So how much of her story is the objective truth? And how much is she subtly spinning the narrative to justify her own actions and her own role in the tragedies that are about to unfold? Keep that in mind as you explore the rest of the book.
It's the ultimate vacation rental horror story. You go looking for peace and quiet, and you end up trapped in a house where the walls are literally bleeding the past. Something to mull over until our next deep dive.
That's chapters 1 through 4 of Wuthering Heights. Lockwood's confused first impressions, the harsh atmosphere of the Heights, the frightening scene at the Lingo, and Nelly Dean's story beginning with the arrival of young Heathcliff. In the next episode, we'll move into chapters 5 through 9, where Catherine and Heathcliff grow up together, Hindley's cruelty deepens, and Catherine makes a choice that changes everyone's future. Thanks for listening to Chapter by Chapter Classics. If this episode helped you follow the story, follow the show in your podcast app so you don't miss the next chapter. And if you're enjoying this series, please take a moment to rate the podcast or leave a short review. It really helps other readers and students find the show.